Waitress helps billionaire's accountant fix computer. The files show he's been stealing from orphans. What if a simple act of kindness could expose the darkest secret hiding in plain sight? Lisa Martinez wiped down the corner booth for the third time that evening, her tired eyes catching the glow of a laptop screen where a man sat hunched over, frantically typing. The small diner was nearly empty at this late hour, just the usual mix of night shift workers and insomniacs seeking comfort in coffee and pie. She'd been waitressing here for 8 years, long enough to recognize genuine distress when she saw it. The man's hands shook as he stared at his screen, and she could see the blue glow reflecting off tears that hadn't quite fallen yet. Something was very wrong. When he suddenly slammed the laptop shut and buried his face in his hands, Lisa felt that familiar tug in her chest, the same instinct that had led her to comfort countless customers over the years. She grabbed the coffee pot and walked over, not knowing that this simple gesture would uncover a theft that had robbed dozens of children of their future. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Lisa had always believed that everyone deserved a moment of kindness, especially when they were drowning. She'd learned this lesson the hard way during her own struggles as a single mother, working double shifts to keep her teenage son in school. The diner on Route 47 wasn't glamorous, but it had become her second home, and she treated every customer like family. The man at booth 7 looked to be around her age, maybe 42, with the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight that wasn't entirely his own. "More coffee, honey?" she asked gently, already pouring before he looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, and she noticed his shirt, expensive, crisp, the kind worn by people who worked in glass towers downtown. Thomas Hartwell, according to the credit card he'd left on the table, though she tried not to look at customer names unless she had to. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's late. I needed somewhere to think." He gestured helplessly at his laptop. "Work troubles. Technology troubles. Everything troubles, really." Lisa sat down across from him without asking, a habit that would have gotten her fired at fancier places, but Jerry, who owned the diner, understood that sometimes people needed more than just service. "Computer acting up? My son Jake's pretty good with those things." "Had to be, considering how many times I've accidentally deleted important stuff." Thomas managed a weak smile. "It's not broken, exactly. It's working too well, if that makes sense. Showing me things things I wish I hadn't seen." He paused, studying her face as if trying to decide whether he could trust her. "Do you ever find out something that changes everything you thought you knew about someone?" The question hung between them like morning fog. Lisa had learned to read people's pain, and this man wasn't just upset about work. This was the kind of anguish that came from discovering betrayal, the kind that made you question everything you'd believed. She refilled his cup again, noting how his hands still trembled slightly. "Sometimes the hardest truth is the one that's been hiding right in front of us," she said softly. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the highway, its headlights briefly illuminating their faces. Thomas stared at his reflection in the dark window, and Lisa sensed he was about to tell her something that would change both their nights forever. Thomas opened his laptop slowly, as if it might explode. The screen flickered to life, revealing rows and rows of numbers, financial records that meant nothing to Lisa but clearly meant everything to him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he turned the screen slightly toward her. "I'm an accountant," he said quietly. "I work for Raymond Blackstone. You might have heard of him. Real estate, investments, that whole world. I thought I was lucky to get the job 5 years ago. Good pay, respected company, helping manage charitable foundations." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out I was helping someone steal from children." Lisa leaned closer, trying to make sense of the columns of numbers. "I don't understand." "These are donation records for the Sunrise Children's Home," Thomas explained, pointing to one section. "Mr. Blackstone's company manages several charity accounts. Every month, generous people donate thousands of dollars to help kids who have nothing. Foster children, orphans, kids aging out of the system." His voice cracked slightly. "But look at these withdrawal records." He scrolled down to another section, and even Lisa could see the problem. Massive amounts being transferred out, but not to the children's home. Instead, they went to something called Administrative Consulting Services, which, according to Thomas's trembling explanation, was just another name for Raymond Blackstone's personal accounts. How much? Lisa whispered. Over 3 years. Nearly $2 million. Money that was supposed to buy school supplies, warm clothes, Christmas presents for kids who have already lost everything. Thomas's hands were shaking harder now. I discovered it by accident tonight. I was working late, double-checking some tax preparations, and I noticed the patterns. The timing of the transfers, the amounts, it's all here. Lisa felt her heart breaking as she imagined dozens of children waiting for help that would never come. She thought of her own son Jake, how hard she'd worked to give him opportunities, and here was someone stealing from kids who had no one to fight for them. You have to report this, she said firmly. To whom? He's Raymond Blackstone. He owns half the city council, plays golf with judges, donates to police charities. Thomas laughed bitterly. Besides, I helped process these transactions. Even unknowingly, I'm involved. If this comes out, I could face charges too. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. The weight of his dilemma settled over the quiet diner like a heavy blanket. Outside, the first hints of dawn were creeping over the horizon, and Lisa realized they were sitting at a crossroads that would define not just Thomas's future, but the futures of children who had no voice. The coffee had gone cold between them, but neither noticed. Thomas was scrolling through more files, each one revealing another layer of the betrayal. Lisa watched his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and a deep sadness that she recognized from her own hardest moments. Tell me about the children, she said softly. Thomas pulled up a different folder, this one filled with photos and case files. These are the kids at Sunrise. The money that was stolen, it was supposed to fund their education programs, their therapy sessions, even basic things like winter coats. He showed her a picture of a young girl, maybe 8 years old, with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. This is Meredith. She's been in foster care since she was 3. The money could have paid for her college fund. Lisa's throat tightened. In her years waitressing, she'd served plenty of kids from difficult backgrounds, watched some rise above their circumstances and others struggle. The idea that someone was actively stealing from the most vulnerable felt like a physical blow. I keep thinking about my own childhood, Thomas continued, his voice barely audible. My parents died when I was 12. I spent 6 years in the system before I aged out. I know what it feels like to wonder if anyone cares whether you succeed or fail. His hand moved to his wallet, pulling out a worn photo of a young boy standing alone in front of a group home. That's me at 14. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to help kids like that, I would. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Thomas had been unknowingly helping to hurt the very children he'd wanted to protect. You said you're worried about facing charges, Lisa said carefully. But what happens if you don't report this? How many more children lose out while you stay safe? Thomas closed his eyes. I have a daughter. She's only 7. If I lose my job, if I get arrested, what happens to her? The question hung in the air like a prayer without an answer. Lisa understood the fear of a parent trying to protect their child, but she also understood something else. What kind of world are we leaving our kids if we let people like Blackstone get away with stealing from the most helpless? Have you ever faced something like this, choosing between what's safe and what's right? Let us know in the comments. The first rays of sunlight were now streaming through the diner windows, and Lisa could see that Thomas was approaching a decision that would change everything. The files on his laptop contained enough evidence to bring down a powerful man, but using them would require more courage than he'd ever needed before. Thomas stared at the sunrise through the window, and Lisa could see the exact moment when his fear transformed into resolve. He turned back to the laptop and began methodically copying files to a flash drive, his movements now steady and purposeful. You're right, he said simply. I became an accountant because numbers don't lie. They tell stories, and this story needs to be told. He looked up at her with a small smile. Besides, My daughter is going to grow up in this world. I want it to be a place where people protect children, not prey on them. Lisa felt a surge of pride for this man she'd known for only a few hours. What's your plan? I'm copying everything, financial records, email correspondence, even voice recordings from meetings where Blackstone discussed the transfers. Thomas's fingers flew over the keyboard with new confidence. My ex-wife's brother is a federal prosecutor. Not local, not someone Blackstone can influence. I'm going to drive straight to his office. As if on cue, Thomas's phone buzzed with a text message. His face paled as he read it. It's from Blackstone. He wants to see me in his office at 9 this morning. Says there are some discrepancies he wants to discuss. He knows, Lisa whispered. Maybe. Or maybe it's a coincidence. But Thomas was already gathering his things, the flash drive now safely in his pocket. Either way, I can't go to that meeting. Once I hand these files over to the authorities, there's no going back. Lisa stood up with him, suddenly feeling like she was sending a soldier into battle. You're doing the right thing. I hope so. If this goes wrong. He pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back. That's my daughter's name and my ex-wife's phone number. If something happens to me, if Blackstone somehow makes me disappear, promise me you'll make sure someone knows the truth. The weight of his request settled on Lisa's shoulders, but she nodded firmly. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to expose this, those children are going to get their money back, and your daughter is going to be so proud of her brave father. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Thomas hugged her briefly, an unexpected gesture that felt like a blessing, and headed toward the door. As she watched him drive away, Lisa realized she was now part of this story too, and she found herself praying for a man whose courage had been born in the corner booth of her little diner. 3 months later, Lisa was wiping down that same corner booth when she looked up to see Thomas walking through the door. But this time, he wasn't alone. A young girl with dark curls and her father's thoughtful eyes was holding his hand, and behind them walked several teenagers who looked vaguely familiar. Lisa! Thomas called out, his face brighter than she'd ever seen it. I wanted you to meet some people. The little girl stepped forward shyly. Are you the nice lady who helped my daddy be brave? Lisa knelt down to the child's eye level, her heart swelling. What's your name, sweetheart? Chloe. Daddy says you gave him the courage to do the right thing. Thomas pulled up a chair, his daughter settling beside him. The federal investigation was faster than anyone expected. Blackstone was arrested 6 weeks ago, and all the stolen money has been recovered and returned to the children's charities. He gestured to the teenagers standing nearby. These are some of the kids from Sunrise Children's Home. They wanted to meet the waitress who helped save their future. One of the older boys, maybe 17, stepped forward. I'm Marcus. Because of what you both did, I got a full scholarship to community college. I start next month. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the emotion in his eyes. I never thought I'd have a chance like this. A girl about 15 spoke up next. I'm Amy. The therapy program that got funding because of the returned money. It's helping me deal with some really hard stuff. For the first time, I feel like maybe I can have a normal life. Lisa had to wipe her eyes with her apron. In her 8 years at the diner, she'd served thousands of people, but she'd never realized that one conversation could ripple out to touch so many lives. What happened to Blackstone? She asked. 25 years in federal prison, Thomas said with satisfaction. And I got my job back, plus a promotion. Turns out the FBI was already investigating him for other things, and my evidence was the final piece they needed. He paused, then added softly, Chloe and I are moving closer to Sunrise. I'm going to be their new financial director, making sure this never happens again. As the group prepared to leave, each of the teenagers hugged Lisa, whispering their thanks. Marcus lingered for a moment. My social worker says that heroes aren't always people with superpowers. Sometimes they're just regular people who choose to care when they could just as easily look away. After they left, Lisa stood in the quiet diner, thinking about that night 3 months ago when a stranger had walked in carrying a terrible secret. She'd simply offered coffee and a listening ear, but sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May we all find the courage to choose kindness when it matters most. Billionaire sees a lonely waitress crying at his wife's grave. What happens next changes everything. What if a moment of unexpected kindness between strangers could heal two broken hearts and change the course of two lives forever? The autumn rain fell softly on the marble headstone as 42-year-old billionaire Michael Chen knelt beside his wife's grave, his expensive suit soaked through but his grief deeper than any physical discomfort. He'd come here every Tuesday for 8 months now, ever since the cancer took away the only woman he'd ever loved. The cemetery was usually empty at this hour, which was exactly how he preferred it. But today, something was different. A few rows over, he could hear quiet sobbing that seemed to echo his own pain. Through the misty rain, he saw a young woman in a simple waitress uniform, her shoulders shaking as she knelt beside another grave. Her auburn hair was plastered to her face, and in her hands, she clutched a small teddy bear. Something about her raw grief called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Where are you watching from as we begin this story of unexpected connection? Michael had built his technology empire from nothing, but success felt hollow now. His days blurred together in boardrooms and empty mansions, surrounded by people who wanted something from him but no one who truly knew him. Elena, his wife of 15 years, had been his anchor, his reminder that life was about more than profit margins and stock prices. She'd insisted they remain humble despite their wealth, often volunteering at local shelters and treating everyone with the same warmth, whether they were CEOs or janitors. The crying woman looked to be in her late 30s, with kind eyes reddened by tears. Her name tag read Lily, and her uniform suggested she worked at one of the diners downtown. She seemed completely unaware of his presence as she carefully arranged fresh daisies around the headstone. "I got the promotion, Mom," she whispered to the grave. "Assistant manager, just like you always said I could. I wish you were here to see it." Michael's heart clenched. He recognized that particular ache of wanting to share good news with someone who was no longer there. He'd gotten that same feeling last month when his company's charitable foundation had won a humanitarian award, something Elena would have been so proud of. The rain continued to fall, and he noticed Lily didn't have an umbrella. Her thin jacket offered little protection against the October chill. He found himself walking toward her before he'd consciously decided to move. As a naturally private person, approaching strangers wasn't his way, but something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the shared grief, or maybe it was something Elena would have done. She'd never let someone suffer alone if she could help it. "Excuse me," he said gently, extending his large black umbrella over both her and the grave. "You'll catch pneumonia out here." Lily looked up, startled. Her face was streaked with tears and rain, but her eyes held a depth that spoke of someone who'd known real loss. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, starting to move away. "I didn't realize anyone else was here." "Please don't go," Michael said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "We're both here for the same reason." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, two grieving souls sharing an umbrella over their respective sorrows. Lily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "She died 6 months ago. Stroke. One day we were planning her retirement, and the next." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Cancer," Michael replied simply. 8 months for me. The doctors said we caught it early, that she had every chance. We bought a house in Tuscany for after her treatment. She never got to see it." Lily glanced at his expensive suit and watch, then at her own modest appearance. "I should probably go. I don't want to intrude on your time here." "You're not intruding," Michael said, and meant it. For the first time in months, he didn't feel quite so alone with his grief. "What was she like?" A small smile crossed Lily's face. "Stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. She raised me by herself after Dad left when I was 12. Worked 3 jobs to put me through high school, always saying education was the one thing nobody could take away from me. She never complained, not once, even when the bills piled up or the car broke down again. Her voice cracked. I keep thinking about all the times I was too busy or too tired to call her back right away. Michael nodded, understanding that particular regret intimately. Elena used to leave me these little notes in my briefcase. Reminders to eat lunch, or just saying she loved me. I was always rushing off to meetings, promising we'd talk properly later. I still find them sometimes, tucked in books or coat pockets. It's like getting mail from heaven. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, but neither of them moved to leave. There was something healing about standing here with someone who understood the weight of loss, someone who didn't try to offer empty platitudes about time healing all wounds or everything happening for a reason. I work at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, Lily said suddenly. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Mom always said I was capable of more, but I never believed her. Yesterday, I finally got promoted to assistant manager. It's not much, but it's a start. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Michael felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death, genuine interest in another person's happiness. But as he looked at Lily's worn shoes and the carefully saved daisies, he realized her grief was complicated by struggles his wealth had never forced him to face. Over the following weeks, Michael found himself visiting the cemetery more often, hoping to encounter Lily again. When he finally did, 3 weeks later, she looked exhausted. The promotion had meant longer hours and more responsibility, but barely more pay. She confided that she was struggling to afford both her mother's medical bills and her own small apartment. I keep thinking Mom was wrong about me, Lily said as they sat on a bench near their loved ones' graves. Maybe I'm not capable of more. Maybe this is all I'll ever be. Michael's heart ached for her. Elena had always been passionate about mentoring young women, helping them see their own potential. Your mother wasn't wrong, he said firmly. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us until we can believe in ourselves. Easy for you to say, Lily replied, not unkindly. You're obviously successful. You've probably never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Michael was quiet for a long moment, remembering his own childhood of government assistance and second-hand clothes. I grew up in a studio apartment with my grandmother. We ate rice and beans for dinner most nights. I got my first job washing dishes when I was 14, lying about my age because we needed the money. Lily looked at him with surprise. She'd assumed his wealth was inherited, the easy kind that came with private schools and family connections. How did you? She began. Hard work, some luck, and people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, Michael said. My grandmother cleaned office buildings at night. She'd take me with her sometimes, and I'd do homework in empty conference rooms. She always said the view from the top floors was beautiful, but the climb was what made you strong enough to appreciate it. As they talked, Michael learned that Lily had once dreamed of opening her own restaurant. She'd even started taking business classes at the community college before her mother got sick and the medical bills consumed everything. The dream had been carefully folded away, like a dress saved for a special occasion that never came. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Michael realized he was at a crossroads. He could continue his solitary grief, or he could honor Elena's memory by helping someone who reminded him of everything she'd valued. Kindness, determination, and the quiet strength to keep going when life felt impossible. But he also knew that approaching this wrong could make Lily feel like a charity case rather than the capable woman her mother had raised. The next week, Michael did something that would have made Elena proud. Instead of offering charity, he offered opportunity. He approached Lily at the cemetery with a business proposal that had been forming in his mind for days. I want to open a community cafe, he said, his words measured and careful. Somewhere that serves good food at reasonable prices, hires locally, and gives people a place to belong. I need someone to run it, someone who understands both the restaurant business and what it means to work hard for everything you have. Lily stared at him, speechless. Michael, I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept charity." "This isn't charity," he interrupted gently. "This is business. I've done my research on you, Lily. Your manager at Murphy's says you're the best employee he's ever had. You increased efficiency by 20% in your first month as assistant manager. The customers love you, and you have ideas for improvement that he's too set in his ways to implement." He pulled out a folder he'd been carrying. "I'm offering you a partnership. 60-40 split, with you holding the majority stake after 5 years if the business succeeds. You'll have full operational control, a salary that's 3 times what you're making now, and the chance to prove what your mother always knew, that you're capable of extraordinary things." Lily's hands shook as she looked through the business plan he'd prepared. It was detailed, professional, and addressed every concern she might have. The proposed location was in her neighborhood, the menu featured comfort food with healthy options, and the staffing plan prioritized hiring people who needed second chances. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Michael looked toward Elena's headstone, where fresh flowers now sat beside his weekly roses, flowers Lily had quietly started bringing. "Because 8 months ago, I thought my life was over. I had all the money in the world but no purpose left." Elena spent her life lifting people up, seeing potential where others saw problems. "I think she'd like this cafe idea. I think she'd like you." Tears streamed down Lily's face, but for the first time since her mother's death, they weren't entirely from grief. "What would I call it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "That's entirely up to you," Michael smiled. "You're the majority partner." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As they sat together planning a future neither had imagined possible, both felt something they'd thought was lost forever: hope. 6 months later, Rosie's Kitchen opened its doors on a crisp spring morning. Lily had named it after her mother, and the cafe embodied everything Rosa Martinez had believed in: hard work, community, and the idea that good food could bring people together regardless of their circumstances. The opening day line stretched around the block, filled with neighbors, former Murphy's Diner customers, and even some of Michael's business associates who'd heard about the venture. Michael stood in the back, watching Lily command her kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd finally found her calling. She'd hired 3 other single mothers, a retired chef looking for part-time work, and a young man fresh out of culinary school who couldn't afford the fancy restaurants but had enormous talent. The menu featured comfort food with fresh twists, her mother's arroz con pollo recipe alongside quinoa salads and locally sourced vegetables. The cafe had become more than a business, it was a gathering place. Local artists displayed their work on the walls, book clubs met in the cozy corner booth, and Lily had started a program where customers could purchase extra meals for community members who couldn't afford them. The Pay It Forward board was always full of hearts drawn by children and thank you notes from neighbors. "She would have been so proud," Michael said as he and Lily took a rare quiet moment together during the afternoon lull. "They both would have been," Lily replied, watching an elderly man share his newspaper with a young mother while her toddler colored at the next table. "You're Elena too. This place has her fingerprints all over it." Michael nodded, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced since his wife's death. Elena's charitable foundation now funded 3 similar community cafes across the city, each run by someone who'd needed not just financial backing but someone to believe in their potential. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something meaningful, a living memorial to the people they'd loved. As the afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, illuminating the bustling scene of connection and community, Lily reached across the table and squeezed Michael's hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing what Mom saw in me before I could see it myself." "Thank you," Michael replied, "for helping me understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring their memory by becoming the people they always believed we could be." The cafe continued to hum with conversation and laughter around them, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most extraordinary transformations. In finding each other in their darkest moments, Michael and Lily had discovered that grief shared is grief diminished, and hope shared is hope multiplied. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing, hope, and the beautiful way strangers can become family when we open our hearts to unexpected possibilities. Waitress walks Billionaire's elderly mother to church. What he did next changed her life forever. What if a single act of kindness could change everything you thought you knew about yourself? Anna wiped down the same corner table for the third time that morning, her hands moving automatically while her mind wandered to the stack of overdue bills waiting at home. The small diner had been her world for 8 years now, serving coffee and comfort to anyone who walked through those glass doors. She'd learned to read people quickly, the businessman rushing through breakfast, the lonely widower nursing his black coffee, the tired mother counting coins for her children's meals. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold on this ordinary Tuesday morning in October. Sometimes life's most extraordinary moments arrive disguised as routine encounters, and sometimes the smallest gestures echo far beyond what we ever imagined possible. Where are you watching from today, and have you ever wondered how one moment of kindness might ripple through time? Ana Martinez had always believed in treating people with dignity, no matter their circumstances. At 35, she'd seen enough of life's ups and downs to know that everyone carried invisible burdens. Her own struggles, raising her teenage daughter Lisa alone after her husband's death 3 years ago, working double shifts to keep their small apartment, watching her dreams of nursing school slip further away each month, had only deepened her compassion for others. The morning rush was winding down when she noticed the elderly woman sitting alone in the corner booth, her weathered hands clasped around a barely touched cup of tea. She looked to be in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a careful bun and clothes that spoke of better days. A wool coat with a small tear near the pocket, sensible shoes worn thin at the heels. But it was her eyes that caught Anna's attention. They held a mixture of pride and worry that she recognized all too well. "More hot water, honey?" Anna asked gently, approaching with the steaming kettle. The woman looked up with a grateful smile. "Oh, that's very kind. I'm Mrs. Wellington. I don't often eat out alone." Anna noticed the way Mrs. Wellington's voice carried the remnants of an educated accent, though it wavered slightly with age. "I'm Anna. This is a nice quiet spot for thinking. Sometimes we all need that." As they chatted, Anna learned that Mrs. Wellington lived just a few blocks away but rarely ventured out since her eyesight had begun failing. "I used to walk to St. Paul's every Sunday," she confided, stirring her tea slowly. "It's only 6 blocks, but these old eyes, and the traffic these days makes me nervous." Anna's heart went out to her. She remembered her own grandmother's final years, how isolation had crept in like a thief. "What time do services start?" she found herself asking. 10:30. But I couldn't ask anyone to. "I get off at 9:30 on Sundays," Anna interrupted gently. "Would you like some company for the walk?" Mrs. Wellington's eyes filled with tears. "You barely know me, dear. Sometimes that's exactly when we need each other most." Little did Anna know that this simple offer would set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she understood about generosity, family, and the power of human connection. Sunday morning arrived crisp and clear. Anna had spent the night worrying she'd been too forward, that Mrs. Wellington might not even remember their conversation. But as she approached the small apartment building on Maple Street, she saw the elderly woman waiting by the entrance, dressed in her finest navy dress and clutching a small leather purse. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Mrs. Wellington admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I keep my promises," Anna replied, offering her arm. As they began their slow walk toward St. Paul's, Anna noticed how carefully Mrs. Wellington navigated each step, her grip tightening whenever a car passed too closely. The church bells were already ringing when they arrived. Anna helped Mrs. Wellington find a seat near the back and whispered that she'd wait outside. "Nonsense," Mrs. Wellington said firmly. "You're my guest today." The service was beautiful, filled with hymns that reminded Anna of her childhood church back in Texas. She watched Mrs. Wellington's face transform during the singing, years of worry seeming to melt away. After the service, several congregation members approached to greet Mrs. Wellington warmly, and Anna realized this woman had once been a pillar of this community. Walking home, Mrs. Wellington shared stories of her late husband, a kind man who'd built a small manufacturing business from nothing. We were blessed with such a good life, she said softly. I just wish. She paused, as if catching herself before saying too much. What do you wish? Anna asked gently. Mrs. Wellington's steps slowed. I wish my son could see past his success to remember what really matters. We barely speak anymore. He thinks I should be in one of those fancy senior communities, but this neighborhood, this church, it's all I have left of the life his father and I built together. Anna felt a familiar ache in her chest. She thought of her own daughter, how easy it would be to let work and worry create distance between them. Maybe he's just scared of losing you, she suggested. Sometimes when we love someone, we think protecting them means controlling their choices. Mrs. Wellington squeezed Anna's arm. You have such wisdom for someone so young. Your daughter is lucky to have you. As they reached Mrs. Wellington's building, Anna made another spontaneous offer. Same time next Sunday? The elderly woman's smile was radiant. I'd love that, dear. If this moment of connection touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Anna had no idea that their Sunday walks were being watched, or that someone was about to enter their lives who would change everything forever. 3 weeks into their Sunday routine, Anna began to notice troubling changes in Mrs. Wellington. The elderly woman seemed more frail, sometimes confused about which street they were on. One morning at the diner, Anna received a phone call that made her blood run cold. Is this Anna Martinez? The voice was professional, clipped. I'm calling about Mrs. Elizabeth Wellington. She's listed you as her emergency contact. Anna's heart pounded. Is she okay? What happened? She had a fall last night. She's stable, but we need to discuss her living situation. I'm Robert Wellington, her son. The voice carried authority and impatience, and Anna immediately felt defensive. Where are you calling from? Are you at the hospital? I'm flying in from Seattle. Look, I don't know who you are or what your relationship is with my mother, but she can't keep living alone. This fantasy about independence has gone on long enough. Anna's temper flared. Fantasy? Mr. Wellington, your mother is one of the strongest, most dignified people I've ever met. She doesn't need someone making decisions for her, she needs someone who listens to what she actually wants. There was a long pause. And you think you know what's best for her? I think she knows what's best for herself. Anna's voice softened. I think she misses her son and wishes he could see past his fear long enough to understand that taking away her choices isn't the same as keeping her safe. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Robert Wellington spoke, his voice strained. Can you meet me at the hospital at 7 tonight? Room 314. Anna spent the rest of her shift worried sick. She'd probably overstepped, maybe even made things worse for Mrs. Wellington. But she couldn't shake the image of the proud woman who transformed during Sunday services, who spoke with such love about the neighborhood she called home. At the hospital, Anna found Mrs. Wellington sleeping peacefully, her silver hair spread across the pillow. Standing by the window was a tall man in an expensive suit, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he turned, Anna was struck by how much he resembled his mother. The same intelligent eyes, the same stubborn set to his jaw. So you're Anna, he said quietly. His voice held none of the hostility from their phone call. She's been asking for you. Anna approached the bed carefully. How is she? Stubborn as ever. She wants to go home tomorrow. Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for someone else forced you to confront your own fears? Let us know in the comments. This was about to become one of those moments that change everything. The next morning, Anna arrived at the hospital to find Mrs. Wellington sitting up in bed, arguing spiritedly with a doctor about discharge procedures. Robert stood nearby, looking exhausted and conflicted. Anna. Mrs. Wellington's face lit up. Tell this young man that I'm perfectly capable of going home. The doctor sighed. Mrs. Wellington, you need assistance. The physical therapy, the medications. I can help with that, Anna heard herself saying. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her in surprise. I mean, I could check on her daily. Make sure she's taking her medications, help with errands. Robert stepped forward. That's very kind, but you have your own life, your own family. Yes, I do, Anna said firmly. And part of teaching my daughter about family is showing her that sometimes family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. Mrs. Wellington reached for Anna's hand. Dear, you can't take on that responsibility. What if it wasn't just me? Anna looked directly at Robert. What if someone else shared that responsibility? Someone who could afford to hire proper help but chose to be personally involved instead. Robert's jaw tightened. You don't understand. I live 3,000 miles away. My business will survive if you visit your mother more than twice a year, Anna said gently. Mr. Wellington, she doesn't need you to solve her life. She needs you to be part of it. The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors in the hallway. Mrs. Wellington watched her son's face carefully, and Anna saw years of unspoken hurt and love passing between them. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I've been so afraid of losing her that I stopped seeing her. He sat heavily in the bedside chair. After Dad died, watching her struggle alone, I thought if I could just control the variables, make everything safe. Son, Mrs. Wellington said softly, safety isn't about controlling life. It's about having people who care enough to catch you when you fall. Anna watched as understanding dawned on Robert's face. What if I moved my West Coast operations here? I could work remotely most of the time, be here for the important stuff. Mrs. Wellington's eyes filled with tears. You'd do that. I should have done it years ago. Robert looked at Anna with newfound respect. And Anna, I'd like to discuss something with you. If you've been enjoying this story of family, forgiveness, and unexpected connections, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of courage. 6 months later, Anna stood in the doorway of her new office, still hardly believing it was real. The brass nameplate read, Anna Martinez, Director of Community Outreach, Wellington Family Foundation. Through the window, she could see the small diner where it all began, now thriving under new ownership, a purchase Robert had quietly arranged to ensure the neighborhood's gathering place remained affordable and welcoming. Ready for the board meeting? Robert asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. He'd kept his promise, relocating to be near his mother and transforming his business model to focus on work that mattered. The foundation they'd created together focused on supporting working families and elderly community members, exactly the kind of people Anna had served for years. Still feels like a dream, Anna admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. Her nursing degree, finally completed with the foundation's scholarship program, hung proudly on the wall beside photos of their first community initiatives. Through the office building's main entrance, they could see Mrs. Wellington arriving with Lisa, Anna's daughter, who'd become her honorary grandmother's devoted companion. At 18 now, Lisa was heading to college in the fall on a Wellington Foundation scholarship, planning to study social work. She looks stronger every day, Robert observed, watching his mother navigate the steps with growing confidence. Having purpose will do that, Anna replied. Mrs. Wellington had become the foundation's most effective advocate, her story inspiring donors and volunteers alike. She still lived in her own apartment, but now with a support system that honored her independence while ensuring her safety. The board meeting was productive, approving funding for 3 new community programs. Afterward, the 4 of them walked together to St. Paul's for the Sunday service that had started it all. Mrs. Wellington no longer needed help navigating the familiar route, but they'd kept the tradition because it had become precious to all of them. During the service, Anna reflected on how dramatically her life had changed from that simple offer to walk an elderly woman to church. She'd learned that sometimes the biggest risks, reaching out to strangers, speaking up for what's right, believing that people can change, bring the greatest rewards. As they walked home afterward, Mrs. Wellington took Anna's arm not from necessity but from affection. You know, dear, I've been thinking about what you said that first day, about how sometimes we need each other most when we barely know each other. What about it? Anna asked. I think you had it backwards. Sometimes strangers become family because they're brave enough to see what family could be. Robert smiled, adjusting his pace to match his mother's comfortable rhythm. Leave it to Mom to have the last word. If this story moved you, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories about the unexpected ways love finds us all. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering that kindness, like love, multiplies when it's shared. Dad, the waitress's pendant is the same as the one in Mom's photo. The billionaire froze. What if a single moment could unravel 20 years of carefully buried secrets? Thomas Bennett was cutting into his prime rib at the upscale downtown restaurant when his 8-year-old son tugged at his sleeve. Dad, look, little Jake whispered, pointing toward their waitress as she refilled water glasses at the next table. That lady's wearing the same necklace as Mom in the picture on your desk. Thomas's fork froze halfway to his mouth. The silver pendant caught the restaurant's warm lighting, a delicate butterfly with tiny sapphire wings, identical to the one his late wife Rachel had treasured. His heart hammered against his ribs as memories crashed over him like ocean waves. Rachel had told him that the necklace was one of a kind, handmade by her grandmother. But here was another woman, about 35, with kind eyes and gentle movements, wearing what appeared to be the exact same piece. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him as 20 years of certainty began to crumble. Where are you watching from tonight? Thomas Bennett had built his fortune in real estate, transforming run-down neighborhoods into thriving communities. At 42, he'd learned to control every aspect of his business empire, but he'd never quite mastered the art of single parenthood. Since Rachel's death in a car accident when Jake was just 6 months old, Thomas had thrown himself into work while Jake grew up with a rotating cast of nannies. Their Friday night dinners at Romano's had become their sacred tradition, the one time each week when Thomas put away his phone and focused entirely on his son. The waitress approached their table with a warm smile that reminded Thomas painfully of Rachel. How's everything tasting tonight? She asked, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. Her name tag read, Anna, and she moved with the practiced grace of someone who'd been serving tables for years. Jake beamed up at her. It's really good. My dad says this is the best restaurant in the whole city. Anna laughed, a sound like wind chimes that made Thomas's chest tighten. Well, your dad has excellent taste, she said, glancing at Thomas with eyes the color of summer sky. As Anna walked away, Thomas couldn't tear his gaze from the pendant swaying gently against her uniform. The butterfly seemed to dance in the light, its sapphire wings catching every flicker of the candles on nearby tables. Rachel had worn that necklace every single day of their marriage. She'd claimed it was her most precious possession, passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. When she died, Thomas had searched everywhere for it, assuming it had been lost in the accident. The police had found no jewelry on her body, and he'd eventually concluded it had been stolen at the hospital. But now, watching Anna serve other customers with gentle efficiency, Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. The pendant was too unique, too specific to be a coincidence. Rachel had insisted there was only one like it in the world. Yet here was undeniable proof otherwise. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Had Rachel lied to him about the necklace's origins? Was there some connection between his wife and this waitress he'd never known about? The questions multiplied like shadows as the evening grew later, and Thomas realized their quiet Friday tradition had just become something far more complicated. Thomas barely touched his dessert, his attention consumed by Anna's every movement across the restaurant. When she laughed with other customers, he heard echoes of Rachel's voice. When she tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, it was the same gesture his wife had made 1,000 times. Jake noticed his father's distraction immediately. Dad, you're being weird, the boy announced with the brutal honesty of childhood. Are you okay? I'm fine, buddy, Thomas managed, though his voice sounded strange even to himself. Just thinking about work. But work was the last thing on his mind. He was remembering the day Rachel had shown him the butterfly necklace, 6 months before their wedding. She'd been sitting in the garden of her childhood home in Georgia, sunlight filtering through the magnolia trees as she'd told him the story of her grandmother's jewelry box. "This butterfly," she'd whispered, touching the pendant reverently, "has been in our family since 1943. My great-grandmother made it for my grandmother's 18th birthday. There will never be another one like it." Thomas had believed every word. Rachel's honesty had been one of the things he'd loved most about her. She'd never been one for elaborate stories or dramatic embellishments. She spoke truth simply and directly, which made this mystery all the more bewildering. As Anna approached with their check, Thomas felt his palms grow damp. He had to know more, but how could he ask without sounding like a complete stranger making inappropriate inquiries about a waitress's jewelry? "Thank you so much for taking care of us tonight," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "That's a beautiful necklace you're wearing." Anna's hand moved instinctively to the pendant, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of sadness or perhaps recognition. "Thank you," she replied softly. "It belonged to my mother." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Rachel had died when Jake was 6 months old. Anna appeared to be in her mid-30s. If this was Rachel's necklace, how had it ended up with a woman who could potentially be? "Your mother must have had wonderful taste," Thomas said, fishing for more information while trying to keep his tone casual. Anna's smile faltered slightly. "She died when I was very young. I barely remember her, but this necklace, it's all I have left of her." If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. The pieces of the impossible puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and Thomas felt the ground beneath his carefully constructed life start to shift in ways he'd never imagined possible. That night, Thomas lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jake slept peacefully down the hall. The moonlight streaming through his bedroom window illuminated the framed photograph on his nightstand, Rachel holding newborn Jake, the butterfly necklace clearly visible against her hospital gown. Thomas had taken that picture just hours before the accident that claimed her life. He'd been so proud, so certain their future was secure. Now, 20 years later, everything he thought he knew was unraveling. The next morning brought no relief. Thomas found himself distracted during important business meetings, his mind returning again and again to Anna's sad smile and the impossible necklace. His assistant knocked twice before he heard her, and even Jake noticed something was wrong when Thomas forgot to pack his lunch for school. "Dad, you're acting really strange," Jake said as Thomas drove him to school. "Did something bad happen?" How could Thomas explain that something impossible had happened instead? That a woman was wearing his dead wife's one-of-a-kind necklace and claiming it had belonged to her own mother? The logical part of his mind insisted there had to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps the necklace wasn't as unique as Rachel had believed. Perhaps her grandmother had made more than one. But the photograph on his nightstand told a different story, and Thomas had learned to trust evidence over wishful thinking. By Wednesday, Thomas found himself driving past Romano's during lunch, hoping for a glimpse of Anna. He felt ridiculous, a 42-year-old billionaire stalking a waitress like some lovesick teenager. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Anna held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. When he finally worked up the courage to return to the restaurant on Thursday evening, alone this time, Anna wasn't working. "She only works weekends," the hostess explained apologetically. "Can someone else help you?" Thomas shook his head and left, feeling more frustrated than ever. The weekend felt like an eternity away, and he spent the time researching everything he could about Rachel's family history. Her parents had died in a house fire when she was 16, leaving her with no siblings and few relatives. She'd grown up in foster care after that, which was how they'd met. She'd been working her way through college, independent and determined. But what if there had been things about her family she'd never known? What if there were secrets buried in her past that even she hadn't discovered? Have you ever faced something like this? A moment when everything you believed turned out to be incomplete? Let us know in the comments. Thomas was about to learn that sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from uncovering new information, but from realizing how much you never knew in the first place. Friday night arrived with Thomas's nerves stretched thin as piano wire. He'd arranged for Jake to spend the weekend with his best friend's family, claiming he needed to work. Instead, He sat in his car across from Romano's for 30 minutes, gathering courage. When he finally walked inside, Anna was there, moving between tables with the same gentle efficiency he'd observed before. The butterfly pendant caught the light as she leaned over to serve a young couple, and Thomas felt his heart rate spike. This time, he requested a table in Anna's section and waited until the dinner rush slowed. When she approached to take his order, Thomas looked directly into her eyes. "Anna, I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound strange." She paused, order pad in hand, something shifting in her expression. "I'm listening," she said quietly. "The necklace you're wearing, can you tell me anything more about your mother?" "Anything at all." Anna's hand moved to the pendant, and Thomas saw her fingers tremble slightly. She glanced around the restaurant, then slid into the booth across from him. "Why are you asking?" Thomas pulled out his phone and showed her the photograph of Rachel holding baby Jake. Anna's face went white. That's my necklace." "But how?" "This is my wife, Rachel," Thomas said gently. "She died 20 years ago. She always told me this necklace was one of a kind." Anna stared at the photograph for a long moment, and when she looked up, tears were streaming down her face. "My mother's name was Rebecca," she whispered. "Rebecca Collins. She died when I was 3, and I was raised by my aunt. But my aunt always said there were things about my mother's family she didn't know. Things that were lost when my mother died so young." The pieces clicked into place with startling clarity. Rebecca and Rachel, both names derived from the same Hebrew root. Both women had died young, leaving children behind. Thomas felt the truth wash over him like a warm tide. "Anna," he said softly, "I think Rachel was your mother's sister. I think you're my son's cousin." Anna's sob caught in her throat. "I've never had any family," she said. "Not real family. When my aunt died 5 years ago, I thought I was completely alone." Thomas reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You're not alone anymore." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. The butterfly pendant seemed to glow between them, a bridge connecting two broken families into something whole and beautiful and completely unexpected. 3 months later, Thomas stood in his backyard watching Jake teach Anna how to throw a perfect spiral with his football. The autumn leaves created a golden carpet beneath their feet, and Anna's laughter rang out clear and bright in the crisp air. She'd become part of their lives so naturally it felt like she'd always been there. The DNA test had confirmed what their hearts already knew. Anna was indeed Rachel's niece, the daughter of Rebecca Collins, Rachel's younger sister, who had died in a tragic accident when Anna was barely old enough to remember her. The mystery of the necklace had unraveled beautifully. Rachel's grandmother had made 2 butterfly pendants, one for each of her granddaughters. When Rebecca died, her 3-year-old daughter had been given the necklace by the aunt who raised her, along with stories about a mother she could barely remember. Rachel and Rebecca had been separated when their parents died, placed in different foster homes, and had lost touch completely. Neither sister knew the other was alive. Anna had quit her job at Romano's and was now working as an event coordinator for Thomas's company, her natural warmth and organizational skills making her invaluable in client relations. More importantly, she'd brought something to their small family that Thomas hadn't even realized was missing, the kind of unconditional love that only comes from blood ties and shared history. Jake adored his newfound cousin, and Anna had stepped into the role of surrogate aunt with the same grace she brought to everything else. "Dad, watch this," Jake called out, throwing a wobbly pass that Anna caught with exaggerated celebration. "Did you see? I'm getting so much better." Thomas smiled, feeling a contentment he hadn't experienced since Rachel's death. The butterfly pendant still hung around Anna's neck, but now it felt like a gift rather than a mystery. Rachel's final act of love, bringing her family together across time and tragedy. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing stories and planning Jake's upcoming birthday party, Thomas looked at the 2 people who had become his whole world. Anna was helping Jake with his math homework, her patience endless as she explained long division for the 3rd time. The pendant caught the light from the chandelier above, its sapphire wings seeming to flutter with life. "Anna," Jake said suddenly, looking up from his worksheet, I'm really glad Dad's weird obsession with your necklace brought you into our family. Anna laughed, ruffling his hair. Me too, buddy. Me too. Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sometimes the most beautiful discoveries come disguised as coincidences, and the most precious gifts arrive when we least expect them. The butterfly pendant had done exactly what butterflies do best. It had transformed something broken into something beautiful, something isolated into something connected. Rachel would have loved knowing her necklace had brought her sister's daughter home. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us family isn't just about the people we're born with, but the people love brings into our lives when we need them most.